Maybe we can start informally, Guillermo, by asking you for your top 4 favorite animated Mexican films.
Well, Mexican films and animation are really, really rare. That we have done only a handful of features, so I don't think there are enough to fill top 4. I think if I had to choose my top one, is directed by a Mexican filmmaker, and I produced it, called Book of Life, but it's an American film. We did it together, but no, Mexican film and animation are very, very rarely together. They co-produce with Spain. Then there was a couple of native animation films, and recently others, but we don't have the industry to create large numbers. Short films, a lot of short films.
Okay, well, tell us some of the shorts, because I do know that there are, the history of Mexican animation is over 100 years old in terms of any length of film, right? So what would be? There's
a good short film that won the Palme d'Or called The Hero, done by Carlos Carrera. There is a film called Jacinta, done in my hometown, Carla Castañeda. There's a film called Hasta los Huesos, which also was nominated, I think, for an Oscar, done with partially with equipment I used to own in my stop motion company. There's a lot of good stop motion in Guadalajara, in Mexico. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There's Mark. Hello, Mark.
There he is.
Welcome.
Hello.
we can finally start.
We can finally start. So you've both done so many interviews about your beautiful film, but we thought we'd do a little something slightly different with our interview, which is something only Letterboxd can do, which is use Letterboxd member reviews as talking points, just in case. I don't know if you've had time to sit scrolling through Letterboxd reviews of Pinocchio. Can highly recommend it. There are some beautiful things in there, but we've pulled some of the best and the funniest and the most interesting, and things that kind of raise questions, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Unless you both have a secret letterbox that you're not telling us about.
No, I don't. I actually kind of avoid reading reviews. Mark?
Sometimes I read them. It starts to feel a little self-indulgent after a while, or just punishing, depending on what's going on. I don't need either one of those things in my life.
Fair enough.
Don't worry, these ones are fun and sweet. These are fun, sweet reviews.
And sweet. Yeah. Although I'd love to kick off with one that's emotional and meaningful. River Jordan writes, Pinocchio became a real boy the moment that Guillermo del Toro placed his own heart inside a tiny Italian puppet. By gifting Pinocchio to his father and mother in the film's end title card, it's possible that Del Toro is giving his long-awaited creation without strings to those he loves, freeing the parents and the boy himself in the process.
Well, Mark and I were in the last throes of finishing the movie when my mom was very, very ill. It was impossible for me to go be by her side because we were doing color correction and sound mixing barely in time to make it for London. So we went together through that. And, I think that emotion is there. I think it's very linked. I mean, I was not able to be by my mom's side because we were finishing the film. And of course, I thought she was going to get better. I thought she was going to be okay. I thought I could see her a little later, but we went through it together, Mr. Gustafson and myself.
Yeah, I mean, I can really feel the emotion in that film. I wept at the end of it. I stood in the rush line to see it at AFI Fest, and I got seated in the front row. So it was so worth it. Easily my favorite screening there. Since this podcast is an awards season show, can we go all the way back before filmmaking? What's the first award or prize you two ever won, and what was it for?
Mark has a good story.
Mark, spill.
I never won many awards as a kid, but at some, like I think the first award I ever got, I bought at a store. It was in the secondhand store, and there was a bowling trophy, and it had my name on it. It said Mark Gustafson, and it was for high average. And I thought, yep. How am I ever going to do better than that? So I have that trophy. I bought it. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, the first award I won was incredibly meaningful because it was a cash award. I had taken a loan on my home to finish Kronos, and I owed $250,000 at age 28, and I had sold my car to finish Kronos, so I had no car, and we were going to be foreclosed, or we were going to be in deep trouble, my producer and I, and this first prize was $100,000, and I always thought when people climb on the stage and cried it was fake, and then we climbed on the stage and I was just weeping, mostly because I was not going to go to jail.
Oh yeah. I feel like that's amazing, and $100,000 is good. Cash is great.
A lot.
High average, Mark. That's special.
Pretty good, you got to admit.
Okay, so we hear a lot from GDT, but I want to read a review from Harper, who writes of you, Guillermo. I'm just glad this man decided to be an artist and not a military leader, because I fear I'd go to war for him.
Oh, thank you.
So, in that vein, what is the coolest? Like, what's the most fun and satisfying thing about working with each other? Guillermo, can you tell us about Mark as a workmate and vice versa?
I think we have the most ridiculously
Careful.
the most ridiculously
restraining order.
Similar sense of humor. I think that we both have the advantage that we don't take ourselves seriously, but we take our job and our work and the artistry of it seriously. We are very, very serious about it, but we ourselves like to be sort of self-effacing and ironic and weird. Very weird about it. So his humor is exceedingly strange, and it's very similar to mine. So it's rare. It's rare to find that. And in the artistic side is a director that I can completely rely that we are both have each other's backs. Like if he says something, it's not something that comes from anything but the betterment of the film. So that's incredibly beautiful. You know, you don't have that with many people.
You know, what I love about working with talented people is that I learn every single day. And that's a beautiful thing. And I learn from the people who, you know, the painters, the sculptors, you know, all the artists, and in particular from Guillermo. You know, he brings a lot to this. You know, he has a vast experience, and it's really fun to have that reflected in this different medium, you know, and pushing it in a different way and bringing those sensibilities from live action. And he also, the other thing I really like about working with Guillermo is that he protects us. He's at the gate. We're not going to get studio notes. We're not going to have to do screenings, you know, for audiences in, you know, different parts of the country, where Guillermo is there and he's like, nope, we're doing this our way, and it's either going to fail or it's going to succeed, and this is the way it is.
I'm so glad you brought up being weird, because we have to talk about that. Gemma and I love to be weird. And Scott writes, this is so clearly a labor of love, gorgeous and distinctive and nuanced and weird, and all the better for it. So can we talk about how being weird is the best thing to be as filmmakers, please?
Well,
because
I think
you need to. Sorry, I was going to say you need to be a little bit weird to get Alexandre Desplat to write a
Yeah.
song with lyrics like "You're a poop."
Yes. Art and poop seldom encounter each other past the age of 3. I think before that they do encounter each other often. But I think for myself, I think it's weird that people think there is such a thing as weird. I think that every person I ever meet is an anomaly. And that's what makes them absolutely worth meeting.
And I think most quote unquote weird people wouldn't consider themselves weird necessarily.
Thank you.
I like weird people. That's why I went into animation.
Yeah. Well, and we are not disappointed, because I
No.
think that what we have is the world on one hand, and whatever you build to cope with it. And it's the world that is crazy. We're just coping with it. In reality, all the social structures, the mores, the norms, the things that we're told should be, most of them go against human nature. Most of them. And we have to protect the human spirit, and sometimes the counterbalance has to be weird.
So true. And I feel like this has just turned into a therapy session for all the weird kids listening who are now being affirmed, deeply affirmed in their life choices. But on that, society and protecting the weirdness, Sam writes on Letterboxd that Pinocchio is definitely going to scare somebody's kids, but it's way worth it. Like, since when does a kids movie deal with mortality, alcoholism, and effing Mussolini? LMAO. Another Letterboxd member, Kevin, calls your film Amar Cordiocchio.
That is one of the few films that we did watch with the production designers. I said Amarcord and Fellini. We should watch because that little town is very much Rimini is the size of the town of Pinocchio. But I think that, and I've studied this very, very carefully through the decades, fairy tales need the darkness to be complete, and in fact, when people talk about this movie being dark, is no darker than the original Disney Pinocchio, which had one of the most terrifying transformation scenes, and really,
donkeys and cigars, furnished my nightmares for years, and I'm very, very pleased you went in a different direction.
Donkeys, cigars, and if I'm not mistaken, beverages that looked suspiciously intoxicating, even if they were not,
Well, it's like Dumbo drinking from that fountain as well. I mean, let's not talk about the weird beverages on screen.
Well, kind of continuing this, I also called it Porco Rocio, like Porco Rosso.
Nice.
I really love and admire how you take these very heavy subjects like war and death, and you distill them just enough so that kids aren't like so alienated and terrified, but instead they learn how to cope. And this is a film for all ages, of course, but could you speak a little bit about how you went about making, like fascist World War II era Italy somewhat kid friendly?
Well, we didn't try.
I love that. That's amazing.
Mark, you want to talk about it?
Well, yes. Hopefully, we're not indoctrinating children into fascism. That wasn't our intent. That's always the hope. But I think fascism in this film is in the background. The war is just sort of a backdrop against which this happens, and we really don't show the war hardly at all. We show a bit of it when we are in the training camp, but for the most part, that's it. And because you don't have to show something like everybody understands that, it's just another note that we're playing, and this notion of fascism as a really awful version of a paternal relationship is sort of what we were getting at with that this father figure in Mussolini who wants everybody to obey and walk in lockstep. He essentially wants them to be puppets. He says, "I like puppets." So he has very few lines, but he really spells it out right there.
The insidious thing, I mean, you see the war in the horizon or the distant plains, but then you see it full-fledged on the exercises of the kids in the training camp. You see, but I think that the political things that shape our world don't need to be geographically close. Like we are all regimented by whoever governs, or countries or legislates our existence into being real or not before the law. And we don't have to be close to the White House to be affected by their policies. We don't have to see it. And fascism is even more insidious because it actually permeates the thought of the people in your family, in your hometown. It shapes how you behave. And there are different forms of indoctrination, and many of them are sort of guarded by things that often are institutions that should be, but are not respectable, So that's the scary thing is like, or it can be the fact that you are told by adults how to behave, but you realize with great horror as a kid that the adults are not any wiser than you. That they just repeat.
Yeah, and it's as though the world is presenting you with ideologies and not ideas, and that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's also, something that occurred to me on last night's rewatch is, much like war, an absence of women, an absence of mothers in this Pinocchio and all the Pinocchios, I guess. And there's very different types of masculinity at play in this film, and I wondered if you'd speak a bit to that.
Yeah, and well, even Frankenstein also has that. These are creatures that are created by solitary men, and I think that's why the maternal figure for us was Death. Death becomes the mother of Pinocchio and teaches him to be human. Mark?
Yeah, no, I was going to say the irony is that the two most powerful characters in our film are both female, Life and Death. And as Guillermo was saying, we looked at the difference between them and we said, well, it feels like Death is more nurturing. Death cares. Death engages with Pinocchio, actually has a conversation with him, and talks about what all of this means. Whereas Life just sort of shows up and, the wood's bright and she's like, here, have some life and good luck. And then she just disappears. So
leaving Ewan McGregor in charge.
Yeah.
Like the cricket's in charge.
But that is true of the original Pinocchio, I think, and it's true of the myth of Frankenstein. The life creation is a spark, but ultimately just gives a few pointers. Be a good boy. What is it to be a good boy? And Death, which is a completely original element that for me was the most intriguing thing I wanted to investigate, was the dialogue between Pinocchio and Death. That was one of the main reasons that I thought the movie would be worth doing. And that's an element, when we were developing it originally with Chris Grimley, that element was not there. And when I said, okay, we're going to have the same basic ideas, but restart the project, that was the first thing that I wanted to vertebrate with Pat McHale. I think is essential. And it may be too Mexican for some audiences, but we believe that Death gives sense to life.
I don't think it's too Mexican for audiences. I mean, it's also deeply Catholic. It's deeply pagan. It's, it's so accessible. Plus you get the death rabbits, which is a plus in our opinion.
Those were there when Gris was doing his version. He brought them from the Collodi book, and then Guy Davis redesigned them in this beautiful shape where they look like they're wearing their own skin as a tuxedo.
You just brought up Pat McHale, and you've spoken about being a fan of his writing for Over the Garden Wall, which is a total masterpiece. It's a Letterboxd favorite. It's highly rewatched every single fall. It's got a whopping 4.6 out of 5-star rating, like one of our highest rated film/miniseries, I suppose. Could you tell us about how you knew that his writing voice would fit Pinocchio's story?
Well, I saw Over the Garden Wall, and I understood immediately that this is a guy that knows the anthropology of the fairy tale, which is something I know very, very well. I've been studying it most of my adult life. I wrote TV episodes in Mexico that dealt with sort of this idea of the anthropology of the fairy tale and how you could use it as a Jungian engine to tell stories about childhood that were darker. And when I saw Over the Garden Wall, I immediately knew this guy was using the forest in the way that is analyzed by Bruno Bettelheim or Jung or Maria Tatar or Jack Sipes, all the great guys that write about it. That would be what would make us connect. But the thing I did not anticipate, and it was a blessing, is that we would also have differences that would clash in a good way and reshape the tale. I think collaboration is great when you have things in common, but it's even better when you have disagreement. I think they're very necessary for collaboration.
I disagree.
I was waiting for that, and right on cue. Yeah. All right, Mark, we have a question for you.
Okay.
On anthropology, you were the animation director for Fantastic Mr. Fox, and for many other films as well. How did this experience come in handy in the creation of, for example, Christoph Waltz's character Volpe? And there's it's a different kind of fox, but there's a lot of creatures through this, and you've used a lot of different stop motion construction approaches to all the different creatures. I'd love to hear you talk a bit about animating these creatures.
Well, every single one of them is a unique challenge, obviously, based on their design. It's really hard to make a 3D design that is going to hold up and is going to give you everything you want. And it's going to last for the couple of years that you're going to spend animating it. With every single one, you just start with a character. Who is this? What's their past? How do they express themselves physically? How does that make them different from the other characters? Is this character older or younger? Or, so you look at all those things, and then you get really good character designers, and you make cool designs, and then you go to the team that's going to actually have to build these things, and you collect samples of cloth, and you do all this work, and it takes about a year or so to make a puppet. There's a story I tell from when I was working on Fantastic Mr. Fox, where we were trying to get Mr. Fox's jacket material, the right kind of jacket material, and we kept showing stuff to Wes. It went for weeks and weeks. It actually turned into months. We kept showing him samples. Then somebody got the bright idea. They said, go to his tailor, get a sample of his suit, and we'll show that to him. And that's what we did. And that's the one he approved. So Mr. Fox is essentially wearing the exact same outfit as Wes. But I think that only speaks to the fact that we're all, we all express ourselves through these films in ways that maybe we don't even realize. And in the best case scenario, as this is something Guillermo says all the time, all the artists on your project should be making self-portraits. They should be able to look at the work that they're doing and say, that reflects me, and it's also the movie that I'm making with this whole team. So if you can get there, that's a really great place to be with the artists.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that might have been my favorite part of the making of documentary on Netflix was the footage of the stop motion animators acting out what their characters were going to do. And I've actually worked with Ance Elworthy on a couple of projects.
Yeah.
He's one of your leads.
He's great.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in real time. And I've experienced in real time the way that animators over time become so at one with their characters.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Well, Ant did a lot of that stuff with Volpe coming down, coming up to meet Pinocchio, going down the stairs and saying, "Oh, the chocolate and all the world," that's all Ant. He did a fantastic job with that sequence.
That's that gangly Elworthy boy we know.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And I think if you watch the different Pinocchios and the different Geppettos, if you had the knowledge of seeing how each animator made a variation of the Pinocchio or the Geppetto is fascinating. They are, some of them understood the violence of Volpe better than anyone. Don't you think, Mark?
Yeah. Yeah. Jan in particular was almost too good at the really dark stuff right before Volpe would explode. I mean, he could just make the hair crawl on the back of your neck.
He was very scary, I would say.
Yeah.
Speaking of making a character your own, I have to ask about Cate Blanchett as Spazzaturo. I know you had such a great time filming Nightmare Alley that she said she would do anything for you. She'd play a pencil for you. So could you tell us, both of you, about directing the Lydia Tarr to make monkey noises?
Well, why don't you start, Mark?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Lydia Tarr because we were doing some pickups for Spazzatura in the studio in London. And so we were recording Spazzatura, and Kate's in there just, she's really great, really committed to it, and was doing a brilliant job. And then, she immediately had to switch over to a session where she was doing pickups for Tar. So she would then go into doing that character. So that's a pretty talented actress.
We were leaving the recording booth, and then Todd Field would be coming in to direct her for Lydia Tarr. There's an old Warner Brothers cartoon where the coyote is leaving and the sheepdog is coming in and say, "Good morning, Ralph. Good morning." And then it was like that. We were crossing each other. Good morning, Todd.
Oh, I'm so glad I asked.
We're convinced that some of her Tar performance might have leaked into Spazzatura, and maybe the other way around as well.
I rewatched both Pinocchio and Tar last night. Sorry, I just want to say I watched both. It was the perfect double feature. Okay, continue.
The way you cast a movie is you try to cast essence, and the funny thing with Cate is if you work with her, everybody knows she's sophisticated, precise, elegant, but she's also raunchy and fun. And only if you know this, you understand how good of an idea it is for her to play Spazzatura. It's like I never had worked with Christoph Waltz, but I had been in a jury with him in Venice, in the Venice Film Festival, for the entirety of the festival. And I thought, this guy will be perfect for this,
I have one last question that I'm going to kick myself if I don't ask. I have to. So Milo writes, the running gag about Ewan McGregor trying to get the chance to sing but never getting to is perfectly done, which I really related to because I'm always wanting Ewan to sing in movies, and he rarely gets the chance to. And I know that he requested to sing in the end credits of Down with Love, which is one of my favorite films ever. So I have to ask, was his Pinocchio end credit song another request, or did you always know that would be there?
No, we originally planned it to be there. The killing of the cricket came from the book, from He Does It Collodi in the book, and we had it from the beginning. But what happened is the song at the end was in, and then we ran out of budget, and the song in the end was out, and then when we felt how powerful emotionally the ending was and how sort of devastating it was. And we said, you know what, and it was very, very late in the process that we said, you know what, we got to tighten our belts and pay for that cricket singing at the end because we need it.
Yes.
Or we will go straight from the theater to therapy, you know? And it always gave sense to the fact that the cricket was narrating everything from the other side. And it sort of made it better.
Exactly. You know what it reminded me of a little bit, and this leads me to our final Letterboxd review and question, was Hugh Grant's number at the end of Paddington 2 in the prison.
The Paddington movies and I have a very weird relationship because in Paddington 2 there is a sort of Shape of Water sequence where Sally has to swim in the water and rescue Paddington. And Paddington 1 was in production when we were in pre-production of Shape of Water, and it has an inundated bathroom, both of them. I mean, and Sally is sort of the messenger between the two. But if I may, Paddington 2 is a damn masterpiece. So.
Oh, that's all we needed to hear. Honestly, well, that's possibly one of your answers too. So Clyra Curtis writes about wanting to bite everything on the set. So yummy is the craft in Pinocchio. And I felt that way. I also felt that way about Nightmare Alley. I could eat that set. But here we go. Adding Pinocchio to the list of little guys I'd jump in front of a bus for. Other members include Paddington, Marcel the Shell, and Shaun the Sheep. So the question to you both, you could pick 4 each or 2 each. It depends how much time we have. What are the 4 stop motion animation films you would jump in front of a bus to protect from disappearing into cinema darkness?
Well, Fantastic Mr. Fox is certainly one of them, and I know that's incredibly self-serving. But I was the animation director on it, and Wes Anderson directed that film, and I think he did a brilliant job. I love that one. In terms of stop motion film, Coraline is still one of my favorites. It did a lot of really important things for stop motion right at a point where it needed it. I also love Chicken Run.
I would say Nightmare Before Christmas, or even although it's not a full stop motion movie, Jason and the Argonauts, for the sections of it that are. To me, that is the pinnacle, the most Harryhausen of the Harryhausens for me. And so, you know, I love when he animates inanimate objects like Talos or the Minotaur or the Kali statue. I think he gives them this uncanny life. So, you know, either of those I would gladly get injured for, yeah.
I can't believe nobody mentioned Wallace and Gromit in the train scene, but that's just me.
I would say that's one of the most perfect action sequences in the history of film, period. And I would put it in if you didn't give us an arbitrary number like 4, and Mark takes fucking 3 of them, you know. I mean, sorry, give us 10.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, keep going. Do you have any more?
No. Well, no. I mean, I love Peter and the Wolf. I think that's a really important stop motion film. But there's so much. We got to protect Starevich. We got to protect George Pal. We got to protect the Quay brothers. We got to protect Schwanmeyer. I mean, Mark. Mr. Resistors, yeah. God damn it, Mr. Resistor has to be protected. Mark, the Adventures of Mark Twain has to be protected.
Yeah, I mean, there's these characters like Will Vinton who had a huge impact, certainly on me and on this whole community in Portland. We would not have Laika today had we not had Will Vinton. And I think if we didn't have Laika, I'm not sure that Guillermo and I could have done this film, because I feel like they really pioneered a whole bunch of stuff that made it possible for us to make this movie.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful to them.
Everybody technically and in terms of pushing the medium into the future by at least a couple of decades, everybody stands on the shoulders of Nightmare Before Christmas and Laika for modern animation.
I just have to say I grew up in Portland, not far from Shadow Machine, so I have to mention that. Portland cinema always. Did you I assume you visited Shadow Machine? You were there often?
Well, Mark lives there.
You did. Okay, I just have to ask really quick before we wrap up, as a Portlander, what's your favorite thing to do in Portland?
Eat.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just great food here.
Yeah.
Honestly. And then hike, because you're right. The woods are right here, so you can get out of Portland very quickly, which is great.
Thank you both so much. We're getting the wrap up, and so I'm just going to finish by saying I feel like you can secure awards season for 2 films by doing one thing that Lily asks on Letterboxd. Guillermo del Toro, if you are somehow reading this, please give people what they want and release the footage of Cate Blanchett making monkey noises for her role in this.
That's all you got to do.
We actually did. We did release it. It's in the making of, I think.
We did watch that, but we want the full uncut. We want 12 hours of it.
All 7.
I will. What I love about that footage is when you go, and then in her perfect voice, would you like Spazzatura to emote a little more, or you go from this to that. So let's Mark and I will roll up our sleeves. Yes,
yeah. We have someone leak it.
It's an Oscar lark.
Yeah.